I had the grants, which enabled me to travel, but it also enabled me to meet people and talk to universities and art galleries. And there's a growing consciousness for art galleries in the country to pay artists to do events. A lot of artists do not have products to sell. I have a few sculptural pieces that I could sell, but I'm always using them, and I rather would keep them and use them and myself in a performance, in an event, and have the art gallery pay me for the time of setting up a display, making a new piece for the show, but still keeping them for further uses. So in a way, it's like an artist arriving with his bag of ideas. The gallery pays you for your ideas because they know from past experience that you did something that was good and it was different, so that they don't expect you to redo the same thing. And one, as an artist, should always be growing and phasing in with the new moods, the new social conditions, the new events in the city, the materials, the space, and you take all this into account and plan a project. So it's been through planning projects that I've made a living, as well as teaching workshops. I don't particularly want to teach for a 4 or 5 month period because I feel that it would bind me too much to a space, and I wouldn't have the time and flexibility to come up with new ideas. So therefore I rely on workshops or teaching at summer schools, and that's been really successful. But you may have a poor month and you may have a month where you've got more money, so it's touch and go. I'm really trying to work in materials that have been sort of cast off and are really quite precious. They were natural fibers because of the scarcity of them, partly the energy crisis. And my whole philosophy really is to show people that you can make beautiful things just from old discarded woolens and knits. And wool, and particularly wool here, are going to be so exorbitantly expensive in the next year or two that there's all the more reason everybody should collect their wools and recycle them. I just collected at rummage sales and Salvation Armies and, friends that are discarding woolens. And it's a matter of collecting them in the bin until I've got a whole bunch, maybe 100 sweaters. And then I dye them in the colors and shades that I like and let them dry. And then I rip them out because I like the kinkiness, the whole curl that's left in the wool after it's been ripped. And that fills in the texture. And using 2 or 3 strands, you can use big fat needles, which are also made out of driftwood. And it just gives it a very natural, soft quality. This is titled "The Environment for Living, Recycled from 110 Sweaters." And it's using 3 techniques. One is knitting, which are the walls. And that was done with collecting of the sweaters and dyeing them, ripping them, and then using homemade knitting needles, which I like to emphasize the kind of natural quality that goes into this whole process. The cushion hook thing has a whole bunch of the sweaters hooked. It's a hooking technique where they are actually tufted into a background, and this itself is filled with styrofoam beads. So it does take the shape of the person that's inside it, sort of a kind of, a sit-in environment. It takes the shape of whatever you are. Well, the piece that I'm knitting this part of is part of the family sweater, as I call it. And it's a huge piece that's going to be about 18 feet in length and about 14 feet wide, big oval. And the idea on that one is that an ordinary family of 4 can live most of their everyday life in this sweater, which keeps you warm and has been recycled from old sweaters, and you don't have to have any heat on in your house, so it conserves energy. And it'll also be in effect as a sculpture, and it could be hung in a gallery or a space as a hanging, because the colors are all blended and woven in. And for a change, I'm using baby blues and baby pinks as the center area. And people could interchange. If you have people come and visiting, they can come and share your sweater. You can watch television in the sweater. You can have breakfast in the sweater. You can all go to bed in the sweater. I don't know, and do some other maneuvers. Another series of sculptures, or so-called sculptural wearables, that I make come from my experiments in making tactile spaces and environments that people can use and experiment with movement. And in a show that I did in New York a few years ago, there was a room set up with mirrors and a changing room, and people could come into the museum, take off their clothes, and put on these sculptural pieces, which are made out of different tactile materials, and experiment with movement and the kind of quality. And the reason for that was that I feel a lot of people have lost a sensitivity to certain fibers, mainly because we're so involved with wearing synthetics. And soon, and through some ways, I'm going to try and make so-called tactile environments where people can try, how does it feel to have leather on? How does it feel to have satins? How does it feel to have fur? How does it feel to wear feathers? This all comes to me from a sensitivity. There's been a lot of involvement with Gestalt and sensitivity to one's environment in other ways. And in my particular way, it is a sensitivity to the tactile qualities of the materials, plus the shape. And the shape of these pieces will allow one to move in certain ways. And some of them are made for 2 or 3 or even up to 4 people. Then the movement will depend on how the other person moves. And that is a really interesting a space where a movement people can try sensitivity towards each other in the movement. And this has worked out really well in schools, and particularly children with emotional problems, or maybe are very shy, because once they're inside the piece, they don't think anyone sees them. They're just fully aware of the material next to their skin and how they're moving in it. And it becomes a very kind of warm and secure space. All the shapes and the sizes and the sequences that the dancers and the people go through are, the choreography has already been pre-planned, so it's easy for me to put them through all these movements. But working with a new group in each time gives me further ideas for another piece or added movements to the pieces that I have. So at the moment I have a repertoire of about 12 pieces. And I will be doing an event probably in Expo, as well as in Toronto in the spring, and another one in